இனி வளர்ந்து வரும் இந்தியாவில் மாறிவரும் உணவு பழக்கங்கள் தலைப்பிலான கருத்தரங்கம் சுவாமிநாதன் ஆராய்ச்சி நிறுவனத்தில் நேற்று நடைபெற்றது. இந்நிகழ்ச்சியில் கலந்து கொண்டு உரையாற்றினார் கார்னெல் பல்கலைக்கழகத்தின் பேராசிரியர் திரு பிரபு பிங்கலி. அவர் பேசும்போது,
Food systems in India are transforming very, very rapid. And why are they transforming? One, there's tremendous changes in the types of food that's demanded by populations in India, especially middle class populations, urban populations. The type of food that they're demanding in terms of diversity, in terms of quality, safety, etc., is changing very dramatically. And with that change, you're beginning to see a push towards more agribusiness, more commercial operations that are trying to feed the cities, that are trying to meet this growing urban demand. And that's creating a rise in new sources of productivity, new sources of growth for rural agricultural households. So I think that fundamental shift that's happening in food systems in India is something that we talk throughout the book. But we also talk about the fact that despite all the progress that's happening in India, India still has the largest number of hungry people, the largest number of malnourished people. We need to figure out how to manage that. Interestingly enough, malnourished population are concentrated geographically in the most economically lagging parts of the country where agriculture productivity never took off, areas with very low yields, very low diversity in production systems, etc. And so dealing with the extent of malnutrition in India is very much connected to figuring out ways in which you can create a Green Revolution 2.0 in these sort of lagging parts of the country. Agriculture being the engine of growth for overall economic development that took place. And today we have these two avenues of growth, one in feeding urban populations and second in looking at the stubbornly high levels of malnutrition in the lagging regions as two new driving forces for continuing to see agriculture productivity growth and agriculture driving further structural change, further economic growth, etc. Then we go through and talk about what's happening to diets and what's happening to nutrition. The nutrition transition in India is really an amazing transition that's taking place. We still have hunger, but we've gone through tackling hunger, calorie hunger, in a major way. We're partially successful in addressing malnutrition, but of course, as I mentioned, there's still a major malnutrition problem. But I think the big story in India is the rising obesity trends. Obesity trends and overweight trends are rising at a phenomenal rate across the country. And if you think about the next big public health challenge in India, it's the challenge of overweight, obesity, and the rise of non-communicable diseases. I think the medical community in India is very much tuned in to the issue of rising non-communicable diseases. But I don't think the agriculture community and the food policy community are making the link between food and non-communicable diseases. We then talk about what are the opportunities for diversification of production systems, what are the technology opportunities that are available. We go through and discuss how do you link small farmers to the food value chains, the supermarket value chains. And finally, we talk about climate change, how climate change impacts agriculture and what can we do about it. So much of the economic development literature has an underlying framework which economists call structural transformation of economies. So structural transformation of economies starts with agriculture. Agriculture, if you think about societies at very early stages of development, these are all agriculture-based societies. So what happens is as agriculture productivity increases, it then contributes to better health, better nutrition, and better overall human capacity to do work and labor productivity, which then drives economic productivity and economic growth. So it's that cycle of an agriculture-led development process that has resulted in economic growth in much of the developing world. So if you look at Southeast Asia, if you look at East Asia, if you look at states within India such as Punjab, Tamil Nadu, etc., these have all grown through agriculture-based growth. And so when you think about this framework, we then say, how do you keep that growth process going? And as I mentioned before, we look at Green Revolution 2.0 and the diversification of production systems as that continual growth process, which is an agriculture-led growth process. Now, really important to look at growth at the state level rather than look at it at a country level. Whenever we talk about India, we talk about India as one big homogeneous country. But actually, there's such diversity at the state level. So if you look at states over here, Bihar, Jharkhand, etc., these states have per capita incomes which are lower than the average per capita income in sub-Saharan Africa.
இந்நிகழ்ச்சியில் கலந்து கொண்டு உரையாற்றினார் டாடா கார்னல் கல்வி நிறுவனத்தின் போஸ்ட் டாக்டோரல் அசோசியேட் டாக்டர் அனகா ஐயர். அவர் பேசும்போது,
One thing that is very clear from the Indian data is that malnutrition, which is generally measured in terms of stunting in children under the ages of 5, that has been as high as 39%. So we have made, over time, what has happened between 98 and 2005 and 2015-16 is that we have seen a reduction of undernutrition, but this has been rather slow. So 40% of Indian children are currently stunted, and being stunted at early age generally means you will be a low productive adult, you will have poor health, and consequently that would have huge implications for the labor market, economic growth, and so on and so forth. On the positive side, we have been reducing it to some level. Now, the second issue is that in India, we also have a very high level of hidden hunger, which is the presence of micronutrient deficiencies. Generally, that's mostly measured by anemia, but it doesn't just cover anemia. Micronutrient malnutrition is very high in India. That's a second burden of malnutrition that we have to tackle. The third thing is the rapid increase in obesity. Just to give you a sense of the problem, 20% of all Indians have now a BMI of 25, greater than 25. Additionally, in 2017, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare brought out a report saying most Indians, 62% of all Indians are now dying from non-communicable diseases. Top among the list of non-communicable diseases are diseases like diabetes and heart conditions, which are also linked to food. So this is a huge challenge that we really need to think about currently for the future in order to reduce the triple burden of malnutrition that we're seeing having an unprecedented increase in the country. In most countries around the world, when they develop, undernourishment, or the percentage of people who are undernourished, decreases. And it is possible, as with the world's experience, that obesity increases among lower socioeconomic status groups. In India, we see something similar. In less developed states, like undernutrition is still high. There are still children who go without food. Hunger is still a big issue. However, there's still 15 to 20% obesity in these areas among adults. And this is a huge number. In more developed states, rapidly urbanized states, obesity has crossed 30%.
இத்துடன் இன்றைய செய்திக் கதம்பம் நிறைவு பெறுகிறது.